Are you ready for me? You're ready? Okay. I have a month of sermons to deliver right now, so hope you don't have brunch plans. It's good to be back. You may have known for a while, or you may have read it in the Lion's Roar that just came out this week, that the Fall Forum series is going to be on the Trinity. When we talk about the Trinity, what we're really talking about is how Christians understand God. What do Christians believe about God? Well, 95% of it is contained within the doctrine of the Trinity. And so we're going to be looking at the doctrine itself, like what is the Trinity? What do we believe? And then we'll look at the development and the history of that doctrine. And we're going to look at why it matters. Does it matter? Is it a bunch of theological mumbo-jumbo with a lot of names, dates, and places that don't really mean anything, or does it really matter? I think it does. And what I'd like to do this morning is kind of give a little preview of the why it matters, and then I'm going to land the plane on why it matters with the section today from that Jeannie read from Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 12. So I believe that the doctrine of the Trinity matters, and in the course I'm going to argue that it matters for 4 different reasons. I think, and there could be others, but just my 4 reasons are: I think it matters ontologically, I think it matters soteriologically, I think it matters ethically, and I think it matters missiologically. Do I need to say any more? We done? Don't worry. It's not too late to get Father Joe back. It's not. We can call him up. No, those are about the biggest words I'm going to use. I'm going to explain them all. So ontologically is how something is. The opposite of it, another big word, I think it's the last one, is epistemologically. Epistemology is how we describe something or explain something. So there are some things that help us explain who God is. Like Psalm 18, it says, God is our rock. In another place, the great hymn, it says, a mighty fortress is our God. In another place in the scriptures, God is a shepherd. In another place, God is a roaring lion. In other places, God is a king. But those are all like metaphors. You can't absolutize any one of them. God's a rock. Well, what kind of rock? Is God marble? Is God granite? Is God mica schist? Like, which rock? Is he the rock outside there or the rock of Gibraltar? Obviously, God is not a rock. But there are things, properties that rocks have that help us understand God. God is steadfast. God is sure. God is something that we can hold on to. God is a fortress, but God is not a fortress. Like which fortress where? No, God is a refuge, like a fortress in times of trial in our lives. Those are metaphors that help us epistemologically understand who God is. What Christians have said for nearly 2,000 years is that the Trinity is not a helpful metaphor to kind of describe some ways about God, but that God is Trinity. God is one, and God is three at the same time. There is one God, and the Father is God, and the Son is God, and the Spirit is God, but they're not three gods. You got it? We'll cover all that later. That's what we believe God is, not just what God is like. And I think that matters. It matters because we want to have a relationship with God. We got up on Sunday morning of Labor Day weekend to come to church to worship this God. It is important that we know some things about this God to be able to relate to God. I am married, but I don't have like a general wife, like, blank slate wife. No, I have a particular wife with a particular name and a particular set of characteristics that make me just love her to pieces, and some which drive me absolutely crazy, which is how it should be. I have 2 kids, but I don't have 2 general kids. I have two particular kids, two very different kids with different gifts, skills, personalities, peculiarities, and all of that. I serve a church, but I don't serve a just general church. I serve this church that has a bulb sale going on, and a rummage sale about to go on, and a bluegrass and barbecue event about to happen, and a series on the Trinity, right? This church, in particular, peculiar sometimes, personality, St. Mark's. We have a God, but we don't have a general God. We have a specific God. And one of the things, we can't know everything about God. If we said that, okay, I've figured out everything about God, I smushed all of that into my head, whatever that was would not be God. But just because we can't know everything about God doesn't mean we can't know some things about God. And one of those things that Christians have said for 2,000 years is that God is Trinity. God is one, and God is three at the same time. And it's important. It matters because it's then how we relate. This is the God who we relate to and we enter into relationship with. I think it matters soteriologically, which is a very fancy big word for salvation. Very quickly, we believe that the Father is God and the Son is God and the Spirit is God, and our entire 2,000-year understanding of salvation hinges on the Son being God. There have been lots of people who have lived remarkable and extraordinary lives on planet Earth. There have been people who have heroically given of themselves, sacrificed of themselves for another person or for a group of people. But no one but God could live, die, and rise for all of humanity at one time. It matters that the Son is God. If the Son is not God, our entire theological system goes out the window and we have to figure something else out. It matters. The Trinity also matters, I believe, ethically. How we fashion and live our lives. The first chapter of the Bible, first chapter of Genesis, God says, let us create humankind in our image. The very first chapter, we are identified as bearers of the divine image. Because God is one, we each bear the divine image. I bear the divine image. Dawn bears the divine image. Laurie bears the divine image. Each one of us, our parents held the divine image. If we have children, they are bearers of the divine image. The people we work for, the people who work for us, all bearers of the divine image. The worst person on planet Earth, the best person on planet Earth, bearers of the divine image. It does not matter what religion we are. It does not matter how good we are, how terrible we are. Part of being human, from the first chapter of the good book, is that we each bear the divine image. It just comes on our best day and our worst day. But because God is Trinity, because God is a Father, Son, and Holy Spirit bound in a communion of love, there are aspects of the divine image that you and I cannot reflect on our own. I can't reflect a communion of love on my own. I need you to help me do that. There are aspects, because God is Trinity, there are aspects of the divine image that we cannot bear alone, that we can only bear together. God said, let us make humankind in our image. Even there, God refers to himself in the plural. We bear the divine image. But unlike when it's just individually, and I bear the divine image, and my best day, my worst day, I'm doing great things, I'm doing terrible things, I'm still reflecting the divine image. That's not true when we come together. It's not just you get a gaggle of people together and, oh, the divine image is there. It depends on what are we being a little communion of love. You know, when Adolf Hitler and his lieutenants set together to put organize and execute the Third Reich, they were a group of human beings. Were they reflecting the image of God, who was a communion of love? Of course not. You know, when terrorists plot and come together to kill, maim, and destroy, they're a group of people coming together. Are they bearing the divine image? No. Are they being a communion of love? No. When we put out anger and hatred and judgment into the world amongst ourselves, are we bearing the divine image of a communion of love? No. And so how we live, in particular, how we live together as a community, as a communion, matters. And it's always mattered. There's a long thread through the scriptures, from the earliest chapters through the last chapters, that God says, I am this, now you do that. Like, whatever I am, you're to emulate me. Deep in the Old Testament, the book of Leviticus, God, the constant refrain is, I am holy, so you be holy. On Jesus' last night, he's at the Last Supper at table with his disciples. He says, love one another as I have loved you. I've loved you, now you go and you love other people. In today's gospel lesson, Jesus says, if any want to follow me, they are to take up their cross and follow me. Like, I'm going to take up my cross and go to Calvary. You want to be my follower, you take up your cross and you join me. What God does, we do. And we're not going to do it perfectly. We're not going to do it at all times, but there are these little moments where, like, the kingdom breaks in and a community of love, a communion of love wells up between us. And there, in that, is the image of God. How we live and how we live together matters. Which brings me to Paul's letter to the Romans, the 12th chapter today. Romans, we've been reading it all summer long. I know you've been following right along with it. If you haven't read the whole book of Romans, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most important pieces of the New Testament. I would also recommend you reading it with like a study guide side by side, because it is incredibly dense. It's incredibly thick. The arguments are sometimes hard to parse out. It's one of the most talked about, argued about books of the Bible because it's so hard. Paul is introducing himself to the church in Rome. Not everyone there knows him. He thinks that not everyone there likes him, even though they don't know him. And so he's giving them his entire theological schema to introduce himself. And so he takes like a month of sermons and he lays it on them in 16 chapters. But after 11 chapters of deep theology, he emerges out of that deep, heady theology and says, let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Like, after you, no, after you, no, after you. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers. He then gets more difficult in the second chapter there. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. If your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty. Associate with the lowly. Do you know anyone who ever associated with the lowly? Sinners and outcasts? I know a guy. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Paul emerges from the deep theological arguments to say, basically, whatever I just said live in love. There's a way that we live together. And you can see here when he's talking, he's not just talking about like when everything's going great and everything's happy and things are happy at home and things are happy at work and things are happy on the news, but he talks about enemies and people who are out to persecute us and get us. And even then, we do not let go of goodness and love. For when we live this kind of way, we are living as God lives. And when we live this kind of way, we are reflecting the divine image of our triune God. Partially because we're doing this together. We are sort of manifesting the kingdom of love, this communion of love together. And when we are treating our enemies and those who are strangers and those who are in need and those who are sick and those who have a hard time living peaceably, we are treating with love people who are also created in the image of God. Our enemy, the stranger, the sick. Which brings me to my fourth point. So the four big words today were ontological. You remember them? There's going to be a quiz afterwards. Ontological, soteriological, ethical, and missiological, which is a really fancy word for saying it's our mission. It's our mission to live this kind of way. It's our mission to show the world the image of our God in our faces and in our community. And it's our mission to invite others to join us. I don't know if you catch the news every so often, but it appears that this kind of living that Paul's talking about doesn't always come natural to humanity. Is that safe to say? But we also know that while it might not come natural to everyone, it is possible. And it's possible not just because Paul talked about it 2,000 years ago, but because surely you have seen it in your lives. You have seen it in your own family. You have seen it in your own place of work. You have seen it in your own community. Hopefully you've seen it here at St. Mark's. The world does not have to look like it looks on the news. It can look like this. And when it looks like this, what it really looks like is God. And that's why it matters.